So I want to go here next. This was interesting to me. Uh, Emily Wilder, I believe, is the journalist who was fired from the AP. And why was she fired from the AP? Well, she was fired from the AP because she had stood up for Palestinian rights when she was in college, and there was this big smear campaign against her, bringing up those tweets. So the AP fired her, and they fired her shortly after Israel's government bombed one of their buildings. So that's interesting. But on Democracy Now! Today, they interviewed Emily Wilder. They interviewed her, and there's a couple interesting things in here that I really wanted to talk about. So here's the first thing that I wanted to bring up. So Juan Gonzalez asked her, Emily, when you were originally hired, what were you told by the Associated Press of what its social media policy was for its reporters? Emily answers, I was told that reporters must not share opinions online, must not show bias in coverage. So let's stop there. Reporters. Now, I think that our attitude towards journalism in this country on the corporate level is completely ridiculous. The AP, which is huge, has a policy that reporters can't share opinions online and must not show bias in coverage. Now, I understand that if you're doing an investigation, you have to be objective and you have to be as I mean, obviously everyone has a bias. It's humanly impossible not to, but you have to be as open-minded and clear-headed as you can be, and just be committed to uncovering the truth, whatever it is. But the problem is it's taken to this extreme place in our journalism where it becomes an excuse for neutrality, where it becomes an excuse to just say, like, well, I don't know, climate change, is it a problem or isn't it a problem? I don't know, because there's a creationist on one side and a scientist on the other, and I gotta not be biased. And that's absolutely ridiculous. And gee, I wonder if the fact that oil and gas companies advertise on these networks have anything to do with this neutrality. So I think that policy there, without any type of context whatsoever, is absolutely ridiculous. You want somebody to dwell in news and politics and do reporting and do investigation and create news, yet they're not supposed to have a take on anything. That's absurd.
So you
What
can
do
be
you
like,
think?
the Palestinians are being bombed, and that's awful. You're fired.
Right. I mean, well, and that's kind of what happened here. So I think right there, that's just a bit like, do you think that's unreasonable?
Hell yes. Well, I don't know how to not share my opinion, first of all.
Sure.
I wouldn't last a day. But yeah, and I mean, you're talking about it online. So technically, she is talking as herself online. That should be distinguished.
Well, and in so many other outlets, they do stuff like that where you just have a little disclaimer where you're like, opinions are my own, or you have
Absolutely.
like a reporting account and your personal account. And again, I'm not saying that objectivity is always bad. Of course it isn't. Again, if you are covering a protest or a strike, or you're just doing an investigation, yeah, you should just be committed to the truth and nothing else. And you should have no other dog in the fight. That is where that mindset is appropriate. But to go as far as to say, well, you can't have any opinion, you can't have any perspective, you can't come to a reasonable conclusion based on what you found and publish that, that's when you're entering this realm of ridiculousness. And it's usually at the behest of the corporatocracy who owns you. And that's certainly the case for the AP.
Absolutely.
So here's the second part that I wanted to highlight. So now they interview one of her colleagues. And so here's the other part in her dismissal letter that her colleague brings up. So there was one tweet that mentioned a mild opinion about the question of objectivity on reporting on the conflict in the language you use. And an editor could have come to her and said, I think you should take down that tweet because it expresses an opinion in violation of our social media policies. Doesn't mean you can't have these opinions, but you can't broadcast them on social media. But I think that the bigger issue in this case, if you read the letter of her dismissal, was it mentions you cannot have any conflict that could be perceived as a bias or leading to accusations of bias. And so when the Stanford College Republicans documented some of her pro-Palestinian activism in college, I think they, and I think she's referring to the AP here, got a little spooked because it was in the context. So basically, they're saying if you've ever taken a stand for something, we shouldn't hire you. That's perceived as bias. So really, in one of the most powerful outlets when it comes to journalism in the United States, if you stood up for Palestinian rights in college, that might be a deterrent. They might not want to hire you. If you were a climate activist, they might not want to hire you. And it goes on both sides too. I mean, maybe there's a more right-leaning cause that you're passionate about for whatever reason. That's a deterrent to hire you, apparently. And I don't know. I would actually want people who give a shit about the world around them and give a shit enough to do something about it, even if I disagree with their perspective, whether I agree or not. I would still want those types of people who are engaged to be going into journalism. They basically have a system set up so that becoming a stenographer is required for the job. And maybe that's why they have a bunch of stenographers doing the job.
I think, I kind of want to look at the AP and see if they've made any donations to APAC or something like that.
Well, I mean, they're definitely all, yeah, I mean, there's definitely all kinds of ties there because it's like, I mean, we, the weapon sales and stuff like that and our government and Israel's government. And so all those conflicts of interest are there, but it's just incredible to me that these are their actual policies and people accept that. Hey, did you give a shit about a civic cause in college? That's a deterrent. We might not hire you. That's bad. That's bad.
Something tells me if you replace Palestine with Israel, they wouldn't care as much because the Republicans wouldn't have searched for it and reported it and everything like that, and she'd still have her job.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's likely. I think it's fair to say that that's definitely likely. But, wow, it's just so... I mean, sometimes when you just see it slapping you in the face, you're like, this is... I mean, just imagine the next jobs fair. Like, hey, you want to get into journalism? Yeah. Why do you want to get into journalism? Well, because I give a shit about things, and I was active in all these social organizations. Ooh, that's actually a deterrent. Well, wait, what social organizations? Were you part of the More Gasoline, Please, and Weapons Are Sexy organization? Were you cheering on the Iraq War? No, I was actually I was part of a climate activist group. Oh yeah. Don't bother submitting your application. Palestinian rights. No, get away. We already had to fire someone. Like it's remarkable. Like it really is remarkable that they're just this unapologetic about it.
Incredible. Is she is she being, outspoken and was it an interview on Democracy Now?
Yeah, she was interviewed and her colleague was interviewed as well. So, I mean, it's I don't know what kind of coverage she's getting from the corporate media, if any. I mean, I know like some people in the independent space are talking to her, Democracy Now being one of them. And yeah, I heard the interview this morning and those two particular spots. I was like, are you kidding me? That's an actual policy? Wait, are you kidding me? They're saying anything that could be perceived as bias, any potential conflict that exists. So basically, give a shit about something, journalism's not for you. Not in the United States. That's the opposite of the way it should be. That would be like, hey, do you want to play in the NFL? Oh, you played football in college? No, we don't want you. You might have a bias to being good at this. We want the person who's never played before. That's literally that's the journalistic standards of our media. People wouldn't tolerate that in a sporting match, by the way. If it was just a bunch of amateur people, well, actually, that might be entertaining, but it might be kind of entertaining, but probably not. And we wouldn't tolerate that in the sports world. But we have that low of a bar for journalism, and people accept it as okay. People accept the fact that corporations run our media. They accept that. They're okay with that. They're okay that news is dictated by Rupert Murdoch, Time Warner, and Comcast. They see no conflict of interest there. They see no problem with that. They think that it's better than, quote, state-run media. Ooh, like, let corporations take over instead of letting people have a say in their own media structure. Isn't that great? And I'm not saying that there aren't state media that isn't corrupt to the gill. Of course there is. But you know what else is state media? Canada, Norway, England, all places that, while they have their flaws, have way higher press freedom rankings than we do, and deservedly so. And it's because they didn't hand their media structure over to a bunch of corporations. Or, excuse me, not a bunch, a small handful of corporations.
Yeah. Thanks to Bill. Only
yeah, right? Good old Billy boy. Oh, that was I think we've actually had this conversation before with each other.
I think so, yeah.
But it's so funny. I remember one time I was, there was this hardcore Hillary supporter, and this was back in 2016. And they were just going on and on and on and on about the media is so hard on Hillary and this and that. And the media is so hard on Hillary and the media is so hard on Hillary and the media is so hard on Hillary. And I just said, well, I bet it's awkward at night for Hillary and Bill then, since he made this media possible. That's so hard on her. And their eyes just rolled in the back of their heads because they had no idea how to respond to that.
You're sexist.
That was probably their go-to response later. They're like, I should have
said, misogynist.
But I blame Bill. I blame Bill. How can I? And rightfully so. He was president when that happened, not Hillary.
I mean, he's a rapist and all, and but no biggie. I mean, yes, queen, all good.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your